Hello and welcome to the Kent Hovengroiper podcast. I am your host, the Kent Hovengroiper. And this has a couple things to talk about today. One, first of all, bad news. The evangelical church has fallen. I was at my preferred, it's an evangelical study I like to go to. I was at that tonight, and the topic went to holidays, and I posited that everyone who celebrates Halloween went to hell, and that was no big deal. I counter-signaled Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and all that junk, and all that stuff is stupid, honestly. It's, I don't know if I'm totally convinced by all arguments to reject Christmas and Easter wholesale, though I am very sympathetic to them. I don't celebrate either of those myself on a personal level, but I feel like everyone should be able to agree that Christians have no business celebrating the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus. But hey, Santa Claus, Santa can rearrange the letters. He can rearrange the letters to be Satan. Anyway, moving on. That's not why the evangelical church has fallen. No, what happened was there's this one kid. The guy's funny. I like him, but he's totally red-pilled on the Jews being God's chosen people. He is 100% red-pilled on that. He likes to bring it up a lot. But he said, "What about this holiday? What about?" I said, there's certain holidays that I think Christians have no business celebrating. For example, if I lived in France, I would not celebrate Bastille Day. And to me, that's obvious because the French Revolution. There's no controversy about this. The French Revolution was a disgusting, godless, communist slave revolt. And there was not a single admirable character in that. And the guy who runs the group who I like, I'm friends with him. And I don't think he's a libtard, but he's like, it wasn't so different from the American Revolution. I'm like, no, yes, it was. Like the American Revolution was founded on legitimate grounds. He's like, but there was some violence. I'm like, well, yeah, of course there's violence. It's a war, but there's a big difference between the French Revolution. Anyway, so I was like, okay, so that's bad enough. And then somebody's like, well, what about Columbus Day? I'm like, what about Columbus Day? Are we Democrats? It's like, there's some holidays that this is not me, this is other people. There's some holidays that might have been founded on mass immorality. I'm like, come on, this is absurd. Nobody argued this about Columbus Day until the Obama Dark Ages, and not even the Joe Biden Dark Ages is when they started upping the anti-Columbus Day rhetoric. Now, I don't even like Columbus that much. Okay, I mean he's whatever. I mean, but this idea that it's a Columbus Day. So I was like, So I said all this, and my buddy's like, wait, so let me get this straight. You're against Bastille Day, but not Columbus Day? I'm like, well, you summed up my position perfectly. Yeah, I don't know. It was crazy. For what it's worth, there was one other guy in there, a good friend of mine, who was like, no, this is silly. The French Revolution was awful. And I feel like, especially, if you're Christian and homeschooled, at some point your Christian history homeschool curriculum will have chapters about how the French Revolution was the most evil thing ever. I don't know what's, because, basically everyone in that room is a Christian homeschooler. So somebody fell through the cracks. But anyway, moving on. What I actually wanted to talk about today, a friend of mine has asked me my view on church history. Now, I do not take a really orthodox view on church history, but let us consider. So, what do I believe? Well, I'm like a Seventh-day Adventist, but independent and based. No, I like all their old fundamental beliefs, and how do I defend them in light of church history? Because I feel like this is the boogeyman for low church Protestants, the church history, and they're not heckin' historical enough. And to me, it's absurd. Okay, that you have to let's start at the beginning. Okay, so Jesus Christ. What does the saying go? He didn't give us a Bible. He gave us a church. Okay. Well, look. So Jesus Christ there's 12 apostles. He gave instructions to those apostles. And he also gave them doctrine. And so, what the polemics go is that, we have the apostolic succession, go straight down from Peter, the first pope, all the way to Pope Francis, who I hate, by the way. He's a modernist heretic. But all the way from Peter to Bergoglio, we have this unbroken chain of succession. How do you like that, Protestant? That's kind of their argument. So what do I think about that? Well, to give the Pharisees credit, they were obstreperous critics. They were Jews. They frequently opposed Christ, but they were not as disingenuous and obnoxious as some of these Catholic apologists. They could have said, well, we have an unbroken line stretching all the way back to Moses. Who are you, huh? No, they didn't even do that. I mean, they did other ad hominems, but they didn't do that one. They could have, but they did not. So, no, when Jesus challenged them, he challenged them on doctrine and practice. He did not challenge them on, are you guys historically valid? Because, frankly, okay, let's talk about Pope Francis today. So we have unbroken, supposedly, we have unbroken apostolic succession going all the way from Peter all the way to Jorge Mario Bergoglio. Now, here's the thing. Peter in the Bible had a wife, whereas Bergoglio is a homosexual pedophile. So, even assuming that Bergoglio does, there's a chain of laying on hands, all the way from Peter to the Pope, well, we still have an issue because the Pope is a gay pedophile. In fact, so is everyone in the Vatican. Now, this can be demonstrated. Allow me to give a basic proof of this, in case you're saying, whoa, you can't just say that. Whoa, that's calumny. You're doing a heckin' calumny right now. Well, allow me to demonstrate. This is easily evidenced by the gay pedophile priest problem. Now, here's the thing. Every time there's a gay pedophile priest, now, okay, if I had a church, okay, and I had priests, and it turned out some of them were gay pedophiles, I would literally string them up in the cathedral, whether it was legal or not, to make an example. That there will never be a gay pedophile allowed in my church. And as soon as I find out you are gay or a gay pedophile, but I repeat myself, you will be shot and your body strung from the rafters. Because that is what I believe should happen to gay pedophiles, especially gay pedophiles who molest the children of the church. Now, that's just me. Maybe I'm nuts. But what the Vatican does when there's a gay pedophile priest is they shuffle him to a different parish. Now, for me, why would they do that? Unless, now we know how gays work. They like to band together, form conspiracies. They like to, in corporations, they like to occupy HR departments. So, therefore, it goes to show that the people in charge are also gay pedophiles and that they're protecting each other. Because if they're not, well then why are they not taking extreme action against the gay pedophile priests? So obviously, all the way up the chain, all the way to the cardinals, it's a gay pedophile. And if all the cardinals, or at least the majority of them, are gay pedophiles, then they're also going to elect a gay pedophile. Therefore, Jorge Mario Bergoglio is a gay pedophile. Now, this makes sense to me. There's some people who might not accept this line of reasoning. They might say I'm going to hell for slander. Well, my conscience is captive to the word of God. Thus, I cannot and will not recant, because acting against one's conscience is neither safe nor sound. Here I stand. I can do no other. God help me. Anyway, so moving on. So now that I believe I've demonstrated that the Pope is a gay pedophile, so what good is it then if we have an unbroken line of apostolic succession, which leads to gay pedophiles, and probably a bunch of gay pedophiles in a row? At least back in the Middle Ages, like the Medicis or whatever. At least they were just normal straight people, to my knowledge. But every time I read about them, it was just oh yeah, blonde 17-year-old girl whose like hair reached down to the floor. Okay, or whatever. Like I can't really like cast stones there, but they were bad. They shouldn't have been doing that. But they weren't gay pedophiles. Okay, I don't know how many times I need to say gay pedophile to get my point across. But okay, so what good is apostolic succession? And furthermore, if Jesus and the apostles teach one thing, and Bergoglio teaches another, well then what good is the apostolic succession? What is the point of it? So there can be no apostolic succession without succession of doctrine and succession of practice. And I think at bare minimum, it would include, Bergoglio is basically an atheist. I like those, or he's a universalist, Unitarian, whatever you want to call him. He doesn't really believe anything. And furthermore, he doesn't behave as an apostle of Christ should. So there is just simply no connection. All right. So you might be saying, okay, well, you've criticizing other beliefs. Well, what do you propose instead? I say it's simple. So first of all, let us consider the polity of the New Testament. You have to a degree, decentralization. Now, the churches were supposed to listen to the apostles, but they were on good terms with the apostles, having been planted by them, and so it was a mutually respectful relationship in the obedient churches. Now, the thing is, there was no guarantee that every church that was planted would remain faithful. Paul warned, he says he wept in Ephesus because he knew after his departing, he said false teachers would come in like ravening wolves and they would not spare the flock. And is he wrong? No, he wasn't wrong. And I also thought it was very interesting what Paul said towards the end of his life in 2 Timothy 1:15. Paul writes to Timothy, "This thou knowest, that all they which are in Asia be turned away from me, of whom are Phygellus and Hermogenes." Now, that is a very a very scary statement, kind of casually uttered by Paul. He says, everyone. We know that the early church was very quickly thrown into disarray by heresy, by persecution, by subversion. It's not entirely a given that every church that was started stuck around, or stuck around in a faithful form. So, when you hear like Eastern Orthodox polemics, we have all 7 churches that Jesus wrote to in Revelation. I think I've heard that once or twice. Well, I don't know. Jesus warns that he was going to remove the candlesticks of some of those. But the faith did not die out. No, far from it. It was always promised that there would be a remnant, that God's people would still remain on this earth, that the gates of hell will not conquer the church. And, hell being Hades, death, really. No, the Christians will never be wiped out. And so even in the long, and this is something I believe in my eschatology, that the Great Tribulation refers to, the years 538 to 1798, where, to a degree, the church, the gospel was suppressed for the majority of that period, and still warred against towards the end of it. And so, this is something I believe was foretold, even going back to the days of Daniel. The church would suffer under a long night. Well, what is Revelation 12? So Revelation 12, I do not believe, is talking about Mary. That's retarded, frankly. No, instead it's referring to the church. The 12 stars, the crown, of course, represent the 12 apostles, or the 12 tribes of Israel. And it says that this woman, the church, flees into the wilderness to escape the devil, who his mouth opens as a flood. Now we know in Revelation 17 tells us that waters represent peoples, nations, multitudes, tongues. The devil pits all these wicked people against the gospel, against Christ, against the church, and it says that the earth opens its mouth and swallows it up. And I believe what this is referring to is how the church persisted in hiding in the wilderness throughout the many centuries of darkness. And this is not something I'm just asserting. This is something that has historical record. Now, for me, I'm a Sabbath keeper. My favorite example of Sabbath keepers mentioned in the medieval ages, in a time where there's seemingly no dissent. Let me find the exact quote. I won't mess this up. Okay, it was Pope Gregory I in the 7th century, I believe. It must have been the 7th century. Writing about, this is in his epistles, B13:1, writing about how, what he calls false teachers who forbid anything to be done on the day of Sabbath. And of course, Pope Gregory calls them preachers of Antichrist. I might hurl that accusation right back at him, but it's not like the early church was not a monolith. And when I say this, Christianity has never been a monolith. There have always been people off in the corner, other parts of the world, maybe doing their own thing. I like the example of the Waldensians as proto-Protestants. I am pretty sympathetic to the Trail of Blood. I feel like there's never been a legitimate argument against the Trail of Blood. Just like, oh, bro, they don't, bro, they came up with an alternate theory, bro. No, I mean, okay, maybe it has some issues, but you know what? It's I think some parts of it are interesting. Anyway, and then moving on to the Reformation. Now, I'm not one of those. So like something like NIFBs, they'll be like, the Reformation, those guys all went to hell, which is really funny. It's so geek and chatty. It's like, yeah, Martin Luther went to hell for baptismal regeneration. And I actually do not like their rhetoric at all. I think it's stupid. I think they're wrong. I think they have their theological hang-ups that if anyone doesn't believe in exactly what Steven Anderson expressed about it, or if they don't believe once saved, always saved in exactly the way they believe it, then you're going to hell. I like the Steven Anderson character development arc where he's been hanging out or he's been going soul winning with this Reformed Baptist guy. He's like, I don't care what anyone says. This fella is definitely 100% saved. And so I like that. I like that sort of. He's growing older, more soy and ecumenical. That's just what happens to everyone. Well, anyway. So the Reformation. Now I like Luther. I'm a fan of Luther, but Luther gets kind of, when he gets older, and he's more comfortable. The Reformation's been ongoing. So like when he's wrong, he's so frustrating. And even just like sometimes, even when he's right, the rhetoric he uses is incredibly obnoxious, incredibly grating. It's like, oh my gosh, like I found like this selections from his works in an old bookstore. I'm like reading it, like what was it, like the beginning, or his in his Bible, I think his comments or the intro to the book of Romans or Galatians. I remember just like reading it like, oh, this guy is so annoying. So I can't say he was my favorite reformer. I think his lack of willingness to work with Zwingli over doctrine of the Eucharist, I thought that shows, this guy was right about a lot of things, but other times he just had his head so far stuck into the sand. I like his contemporary Andreas Karlstadt, who is basically me. He was a Sabbath keeper. He was actually, I'm not really an iconoclast. I don't have a super strong opinion on that. Though, of course, I am really very strongly against image veneration. And honestly, I can understand why some of the reformers would adopt a policy of iconoclasm. But anyway, Andreas Karlstadt, yeah, he was, I guess, a little crazy in his own respects. But yeah, he kept the Sabbath. He married a teenager. I respect him. Anyway. Now, John Calvin is probably the reformer I respect the most. I actually like Calvinism. As this is, okay, well, I'm not a Calvinist in terms of soteriology. I'm an Arminian. But I really do like Calvin's approach to Scripture. I like his... And, okay, yeah, it's like the Servetus. Oh, he was a tyrant. No, that's... even Ellen White, she wrote positively of Calvin. The Servetus thing was... Servetus was a nut job, okay? They told him they were going to kill him if he went to Geneva. Now, okay, were they bloodthirsty tyrants? No, they gave the guy advance warning. He went there anyway. I mean, the guy had a death wish. Kind of like Muslims, but whatever. So yeah, no, that to me is stupid when people criticize him for that. I might... There are other things I might disagree with Calvin, but that's not one where I'm clutching pearls over that. No, I think Calvin's influence was for the most part good. I really like the Puritans, even though I disagree with them on some points. Yeah, that's something you're actually allowed to do. When you are a Christian, you're allowed to read a thinker and say, well, I like this part. But I don't like this thing that he talks about. Yeah, it's pretty cool. You don't have to... Anyway. But the thing with the Reformation, where it gets a little ugly, I think they were kind of weird with the Anabaptists. And I'm not talking about the Anabaptists in Munster, who were obviously crazy anarchists, criminals, etc., but I think it's a little strange how they're we finally threw off that Catholic yoke. They're killing us for heresy and stuff. Whoa, hold on. You think that we should baptize people as adults? Yeah, you're insane. You're going to destroy everything we've worked for. We're going to drown you. I don't know. That seems like a tad bit of an overreaction. I always remember that one martyr, Dirk Willems, who was running basically for his life, and the guy who was chasing him fell into an icy pond, and Dirk turned around and pulled him out in an immense act of kindness and love. Frankly, I'm not sure if I would have done that. If I were in his shoes, I might have been I've been delivered by God. Again, kept running. But no, Dirk Willems, in an act of charity, literally saved the guy's life. The guy was trying to kill him. And despite this, obviously, this man was an insane, dangerous heretic. His pursuer was reminded of his oath by the burgomaster and arrested him, and then they burned him at the stake. That's because obviously, this guy was a real menace to society. Come on. And, of course, modern confessional Protestants, the really edgy types who have big beards, they like to say, oh, yep, he got what was coming to him. We need to drown those Anabaptists again. All right, whatever. I think that's retarded. I think you're a retard if you say that. I think you are absolutely retarded. That is another thing that irks me. Protestant commentators are quite often stuck in the past. As in, they literally cannot interpret modern Christianity or things that happen in modern Christianity through a non-17th century lens. And you see that, or even worse, that's why you have retards like Redeemed Zoomer, who's evangelicals, if only they would read the Nicene Creed. Well, guess what, pal? Trans bishops like to also recite the Nicene Creed, and a lot of good that does them. No, that's not the issue with evangelicals. We don't need to worry about Pastor Jim doing a Darth Vader Nestorius Pelagianism. I genuinely do not think that's the issue. The issue is that Pastor Jim weighs 300 pounds, and won't preach on how gluttony sends you to hell. He can't. He's compromised. Okay, that's the issue. But Redeemed Zuber will never say that. Though, I'm thinking about it. Maybe I am doing an individualism, a heck in individualism, a heck in a disregard for history. But genuinely, I don't think you have to hold yourself to tradition. I think you have to hold yourself to truth. And I do think there is an objective truth. I think there is one correct way to interpret the Bible in terms of what should be practiced, how should we worship. And I think I can prove what I believe through logic, through reason, through harmony of the scriptures. Now, okay, I'm aware that a lot of people say that, heretics say that, but the thing is, I've researched what I believe, I've stuck with it, I've practiced it for many years now. I've seen a lot of arguments against it. None of them have really been particularly impressive. Maybe I'm stubborn, maybe I'm not, but genuinely I'm not convinced by any arguments I've seen against any of my beliefs. If I did, I would change them. I'm not averse to change. But to my friend who asked for this episode on how I view church history, well, I view it as a record of true men of God. I think there were many, many admirable characters all throughout the history of Christians, and I think there are a lot of false teachers, actual heretics, subverters, worldly men who happen to be in great positions of power in the church. But, all in all, yeah, I'm not letting what the church, in quotes, has, in quotes, always believed. I don't think that's historically valid. I don't think that's a way to interpret it, because reality is, if everyone in history could have been wrong for 2,000 years, let every man be a liar and let God be true. I genuinely believe that it doesn't matter if billions of people were wrong. It doesn't matter if billions of people went to hell. That does not change truth. That is a logical fallacy. Okay, there could be a billion people screaming in my ear to, venerate the Theotokos or whatever. That doesn't change that it goes against truth. So if you're a Protestant, I would like... Oh yes, that reminds me, one other thing I'd like to mention. So Protestant apologists like to do this thing where they say, Rome was no longer the church after Trent. It apostatized at Trent. Like, no, come on, that's stupid. Because then you're saying that the only difference between you and Rome is the doctrine of justification. No, okay, Rome has been apostate as long as they've been worshiping idols. Okay, this is one thing that drives me crazy. Because people will be like, the veneration of icons is wrong, but it's not that wrong. Well, then, is it wrong or is it not wrong? Is it sinful or is it not sinful? If it's sinful, then you have, in quotes, the church promoting sin for centuries. And if it's not wrong, well, then why don't you go join them? Why are you a Protestant? It is a major error. It is not a little thing. It's one of the 10 Commandments. Okay, if they... It's like if they said, adultery was permissible. Well, anyway. So what was I saying? Yeah, no, if you're a Protestant, I think don't fall for these, don't be intimidated by these memes about, quotes, church history. I genuinely think it's not the boogeyman that some of you think it is. It's just approach it with a calm head. Anyway, I'm rambling. This is a half hour. I know it's been requested for longer podcasts, but brevity is the soul of wit, so I'll end it here. Thank you very much for listening. May God bless you. May He lead you all into truth, light, and love. I hope to see you all very soon.